I'd like to thank everybody that has been behind the scenes. So please, a round of applause for the people that are able to put this together. And yeah, so thanks for coming in. My talk is going to be around how to solve the cold start problem by embracing open graphs. I'm going to keep it a little bit more level down. I'm not going to dive too deep, but my intention really is to reflect, take a look at how the landscape has been building up through the past couple of years, 40 years and so, in Silicon Valley, reflect where we currently are and where the industry is going, specifically with Web3. So, the cold start problem. Fundamentally, where we all begin as startups, it's hard to build, right? If anybody here already has 100 million users, please get up and leave. This probably won't be for you. So, essentially, the starting point for everyone when we build something, there's a lack of value, right? And Andrew Chen, the general partner of A16Z, has written a book about this because it's important for everybody to know. He also talks about network effects. I'll be covering that as well. And I want to dive into the open graphs as well. So why is this important? Everyone faces it, right? But if we take a look at the current landscape of the industry, and by that I mean the most valuable companies in the world, we have the value capture with graphs, right? So if you think about Google, the knowledge graph. You think about Facebook, the social graph. And if you think about Amazon, the product graph. And altogether, you have a massive value capture of more than 4.8 trillion. And all of these graphs have been closed. Now, we are beginning to see more and more adoption with open graphs. And I'll get a little bit later into how we're going to be able to tap into these opportunities. So let's begin with defining what a graph is, right? Just very simple. We have a structure, and on that structure, we have objects and their relations. Very simple. And within those graphs, there are specific types, like I mentioned, the product graph, the social graph, and the knowledge graph. Now, the reason why these graphs become valuable is because of network effects. In simple terms, the network effects are when someone joins the network, it becomes more valuable, right? Think about the phone. It took a very smart person to create a phone, but it takes a genius to sell one. Why? If you're the first person that ever gets a phone, who are you going to call? There's no value in the network then. Fast forward, you have billions of people using the phones, and the value of the network is apparent. So, again, tying the dots together, network effects and graphs together, a lot of value that you can capture. So, the faces that everybody knows here, I'm only gonna pick on Web 2, not gonna pick on Web 3. You can see how these people started, very cold, and at that point, it was the only way, right? So, how they tackled this, Facebook, famous for starting only in Harvard, getting people into the network. Now, all of a sudden, you had a social graph that you could tap into, right? Tinder, they started throwing parties in universities. Who would have wanted to attend one of those? And essentially, within their network, now they had people that you could date. No one's going to want to join a dating app where there are no options, right? So Airbnb, being famous, their founders for knocking on doors, having people list, and as well encouraging people to rent from the platform, right? So that there is the graph being built up. And Uber, who has been seeing the series on Netflix? Anyone? All right, I just started yesterday, so there was a large capital injection in order to begin building the graph of transportation. So in summary, it took a very big effort to reach escape velocity and grow those network effects. All right, so we can see a relation here, right? As network effects go higher, the cold start problem goes lower. Just like that. So let's touch now into the role of open graphs, because the examples that I've been giving are, the majority of them are closed graphs, right? Permissioned, they have walls, wall gardens. They're not designed for anybody to just tap in and make use of that data as much as you want. And essentially now with open graphs, we are able to have more momentum. We're able to build with innovation because we're not starting from zero. You don't have to go knocking on doors. You don't have to have massive injections of capital anymore to begin with a user base. You don't have to have large amounts of capital in order to incentivize people. So it is a different playing field in which we currently are and are heading towards. So think about when you're starting something, right? We all have some decisions that we need to take into account. If we are beginning a startup and, well, we're going to need some users, we're going to need a network, it makes sense to build where the users are. It's more attractive, they can be more engaging, and essentially you don't have to really convince them too much to run down a mile in order for them to download your app and to begin trying out a new home, right? So why reinvent the wheel when there's a lot of wheels up and running? And the most exciting part here, right? So we already have very well-developed graphs, like I mentioned before, the social graph and so on, that they have captured a lot of value. However, now we can build on top of value. You can add and take that value further by tapping into open graphs, because as a developer, you have the freedom to use that data as you want. You have composability, you have modularity, and you're able to just experiment. So let's take a look at some examples that have used open graphs. Many of you might be already familiar with Mastodon, Threads as well, Instagram. Now, ActivityPub is actually the social networking protocol. It's an open graph that is below of both of these applications. An asterisk for Threads, because they're supposed to go with ActivityPub. That's the promise. But so we're going to see that hopefully in the next couple months. But essentially, the whole value add here is if you are tapping into an open graph like ActivityPub, now you tap into the network of both Mastodon and Threads. So for a minute, imagine that you want to build your own social network or an app that you want to tap into these users. Have a little birdie there. Now, everything is interoperable. It is accessible. If I want to have a social app and post on Mastodon, I'm going to be able to see it on my Bird app. I'm going to be able to see it on Threads and vice versa. So this opens up a new landscape of tapping into network effects, tapping into people without them having to start from zero and without you having to start from zero. This is a very classic example, right? The EVM, people launching layer 1s, layer 2s, social graphs on Ethereum, and this is going to continue. But let me just, for a second, imagine where we would be if every time a new layer 1 spins up, we have different wallets with different formats, and we have to start from zero. And this is one of the most exciting graphs that are coming up and being developed, which is the financial graphs. So again, in blockchain, we have a lot of advantage. We're still young, right? Ethereum has been around for what, around 9-10 years soon. So do we talk about Cosmos here? Cosmos ecosystem? This is another great example of tapping into network effects, having interoperability between ecosystems, and the users being able to engage seamlessly. This is one of the most recent examples that many of you might already be familiar with. Farcaster, right? By tapping into the extended Open Graph standard, which Facebook developed, they were able to develop frames. So essentially creating mini apps that have a lot more flexibility inside of the Farcaster protocol. And we're starting to see a lot of crazy stuff being done there. So a very good example. Oops. So this is the approach that we are taking at Timeless, which we're building a Web3 wallet, right? Leveraging account abstraction, and in very simple terms, we are tapping into different open graphs to provide a seamless experience within the same place, right? So the starting point in Web3 is your wallet. You have open graphs. You have means of communication that are open as well. Why not put that all together? Right, so let's talk about the potential here. The closed graphs, for more than 4 trillion in value, and the open graphs that are growing, we're moving from renting our data in the internet to owning our data in the internet. When we own that data in the internet, that lies mostly on open graphs. It's the data that we can control. And one of the most interesting parts of this is that when you have a closed graph, it's singular, right? Remember ActivityPub? You have different applications. Now you're tapping into an aggregated pool of data where multiple open graphs are able to, so you're able to put together multiple open graphs instead of just building on top of one. So essentially, now we're able to tap into use cases that even the builders of that first open graph didn't even think about. So the key takeaways: open graphs, best friends for network effects. We don't have to start slow. We don't have to start cold. And it's ideal to build where the users are so that we can get up and running. And as the network effects go up, co-star problem comes down. All right, so for everyone that stuck around here, I've just created a little POAB for you guys. Very thankful for supporting, very thankful for your support. I'll be here if there's any questions. I think I still have a little bit of time. So if you want to connect, you can find me here as well. And thank you.